The heart monitor flatlined at 7:14 a.m. Dr. Sarah Brennan's hands moved automatically. Compressions, 1, 2, 3, 4, but her eyes stayed locked on something impossible. Robert Mitchell's chest wasn't rising. His pupils were fixed. Yet beneath the papery skin of his wrist, something moved. Clear. She placed the paddles. His body arched. Nothing. Behind her, Emily Carter's scream cut through the machinery's wail. Nurse Rebecca Sullivan backed toward the door, her face drained of color. She'd seen death before. This wasn't death. This was something else. Robert's eyes snapped open, not the clouded gaze of a dying man, but sharp, alert, wrong. For just a moment, they caught the fluorescent light and threw back something that shouldn't exist in a human iris, a faint green shimmer, like phosphorescence in deep water. Dr. Brennan's hands trembled as she stepped back. "What started this?" someone whispered. The answer seemed impossible. 72 hours ago, it had been just a mosquito bite. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 72 hours earlier, Robert Mitchell had been standing in his kitchen, watching steam rise from his coffee like ghosts dissolving into morning light. The cabin hadn't changed much since Catherine died 7 years ago. Same checkered curtains she'd sewn in 1985. Same wooden table with the burn mark from that 4th of July when he'd set down a sparkler too close to the edge. Same everything, really, except the silence had gotten heavier. It pressed down on the rooms like accumulated snow on a roof. You didn't notice the weight until you wondered if the beams might crack. He poured coffee into the chipped mug, "World's okayest grandpa" in faded letters, and scratched absently at his right wrist. A small red welt had appeared there sometime during the night, probably a mosquito. Maine summers bred them thick as sawdust in a mill. He'd gotten dozens of bites over 68 years. This was nothing. The blue shirt hung on the back of the chair. Thursday. Catherine's rule, one of hundreds of small rituals that had held their marriage together like mortise and tenon joints. Wear the blue shirt on Thursdays. Check the propane tank on Mondays. Make cornbread on Saturdays, even after the kids moved out, even after the house got quiet. He still followed everyone. Robert buttoned the shirt, his hand steady despite the arthritis that had started creeping into his knuckles, and looked at the wedding photo on the wall. Catherine in that yellow dress, him in army greens, Fort Bragg, 1978. Her smile had always been too big for her face. Like joy couldn't be contained. Emily had inherited that smile. His granddaughter would be here soon for their weekly walk. 17, sharp as a tack, talking constantly about marine biology and college applications to schools so far away they felt like different countries. She was the only person who still came out to the cabin regularly, the only one who didn't look at him like he was already a memorial service waiting to happen. The welt itched again. He pressed his thumbnail into it, felt the small satisfaction of pressure against irritation. The skin around it looked slightly darker than it had a moment ago, but that was probably just the morning light playing tricks. Outside, the Moosehead Lake mist clung to the tree line, and somewhere in the distance, a loon called once, then fell silent. Robert finished his coffee and waited for Emily's car to rattle up the gravel drive, never suspecting that the small red mark on his wrist had already begun counting down the hours he had left. Emily's Honda Civic announced itself with the familiar rattle of a loose heat shield before Robert even saw it through the trees. He was already on the porch, lacing up his hiking boots, the old Danners he'd resold twice because good boots were like good friends, worth the investment in keeping around. She stepped out wearing cut-off jeans and a University of Maine sweatshirt, one earbud still dangling from her collar. "You're actually ready on time," she said, slinging her backpack over one shoulder. "Should I check for a fever?" "Clock's running fast," he said. which was what he always said, even though they both knew his kitchen clock had been exactly 3 minutes slow since 1999. They took the old logging trail that wound through the pine forest toward the lake. It was the same path he'd walked with Catherine every Sunday before the cancer got into her bones and made walking anywhere an act of negotiation with pain. Emily talked as they walked. Something about her college essay, about whether she should write about her grandmother or take a safer topic, about how her mother thought marine biology was impractical and maybe she should consider nursing instead. Robert half listened, the way grandparents do when the sound of a voice matters more than the words. His attention kept drifting to his wrist. The bite had grown. Not dramatically, but enough that he'd noticed it while tying his boots. The red circle had expanded to the size of a quarter, and the center had darkened to an angry purple. "You hear about the Hendersons' dog?" Emily asked, stepping over a fallen branch. "No. Came back from the woods last week acting weird. Mrs. Henderson said it kept standing in corners, just staring at nothing. Vet thinks it might be some kind of tick-borne thing, Lyme disease or something worse." She glanced at him. "You should check yourself when we get back." "Ticks are really bad this year. I've had worse than a tick bite. That's what every old guy says right before they end up in the hospital." He smiled despite himself. She had Catherine's way of worrying, practical, direct, wrapped in sarcasm to make it easier to swallow. "I'm fine, kiddo." But he wasn't fine. His vision had blurred twice on the trail just for a second or two, like looking through a camera lens that wouldn't quite focus. And there was something else, something he couldn't quite name, a sensation like being watched, but from inside rather than out, like his own body had become a stranger paying too much attention. When they reached the clearing where the trail opened onto the lake, Emily stopped to take a photo of the water. Robert stood beside her, scratching at the bite, and for just a moment, so brief he almost convinced himself it hadn't happened, he heard Catherine's voice. Not a memory, not imagination. Her actual voice, clear as the loon calls across the water, saying his name the way she used to when she wanted his attention. "Bobby." He turned sharply, heart hammering, but there was only Emily lowering her phone and the endless ranks of pine trees standing silent as witnesses to something he couldn't explain. "You okay, Grandpa?" Emily was looking at him with that worried crease between her eyebrows that made her look exactly like her grandmother at 25. "Fine," he said. "Just thought I heard something." They walked back in relative quiet, and he was grateful she didn't press. When they reached the truck, Robert glanced down at his wrist one more time. The welt had doubled in size again. A pale ring of skin surrounded the dark center now, almost perfectly circular, like a target drawn on his flesh. Emily noticed this time. "Grandpa, that looks bad." "It's nothing, just a bug bite." "That's not nothing." "That's—" She pulled out her phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen. "That's a bullseye rash. That's the classic sign of Lyme disease. You need to see a doctor." "I don't need—" "Yes, you do." Her voice had shifted, taken on that tone of authority that reminded him she wasn't a child anymore. "Mom would kill me if I let you ignore this. Please, just get it checked." He wanted to argue, but the truth was, his wrist had started to burn. Not itch, but actually burn. Like someone was holding a lit match just beneath the skin. And there was something else, something harder to articulate. A growing sense that his body wasn't entirely his own anymore, that something was happening beneath the surface that had nothing to do with mosquitoes or ticks or any of the rational explanations he'd spent his life trusting. "Tomorrow," he finally said. "I'll call the clinic tomorrow." Emily studied his face, unconvinced but willing to accept the compromise. "First thing in the morning." "Promise?" "Promise." She hugged him, quick, fierce, and got into her car. He watched her drive away, dust rising behind the tires like a question mark hanging in the air. Back in the cabin, Robert poured himself a glass of water and stood at the sink, staring out the window at the darkening tree line. The Philco radio crackled to life. He must have bumped it. And a news announcer's voice filtered through the static. Centers for Disease Control warn of increased tick activity this season due to warming temperatures and changing migration patterns. Residents are advised to check for bites and seek medical attention for any unusual symptoms. He turned it off. The bite throbbed. He pressed his thumb against it and felt something shift beneath the surface, not painful exactly, but present, like a second heartbeat pulsing in his wrist. That night, he sat in Catherine's old recliner because the bed felt too empty, and he must have dozed off because when he opened his eyes, the digital clock read 11:47 p.m., and he was drenched in sweat. The dream clung to him like cobwebs. He'd been somewhere hot, jungle hot, the kind of wet heat that made breathing feel like drowning in air. Men had moved around him, speaking in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. He'd carried a rifle, felt its weight distributed perfectly across his body, the way you only learn through countless hours of practice. He'd looked down at a river and seen a face in the reflection that wasn't his. Younger, harder, eyes that had seen things Robert Mitchell had never witnessed. But that was impossible. Robert had served in Korea, not Vietnam. He'd never set foot in a jungle. He'd never carried that particular model of rifle. He'd never learned Vietnamese. Yet in the dream, he'd understood every word. And when he woke, he'd been speaking out loud. The words were still on his tongue, foreign but somehow familiar. Chung ta phai nyo. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew, with the kind of certainty that lives in the body rather than the mind, that it was important, that it meant something, that whatever was happening to him had started long before any mosquito or tick had found his skin. Robert looked down at his wrist. In the dim light from the kitchen, the bite seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, a dark eye opening in his flesh, watching him from the inside out. The Brunswick Medical Clinic occupied a converted Victorian house on Maple Street, the kind of building that still had the original crown molding and floors that creaked in specific places like a musical instrument being played by footsteps. Robert had been coming here since 1982, back when Dr. Patterson ran the practice and knew every patient by their first name and their family history going back 3 generations. Now, it was Dr. Sarah Brennan's practice, and she knew him for a different reason. She'd been Catherine's oncologist during those last terrible months when hope became something you measured in days instead of years. Nurse Rebecca Sullivan looked up from the reception desk and smiled with recognition that immediately shifted to concern. She'd babysat Emily when she was 6, had taught her how to braid hair and make friendship bracelets, and she had that particular Maine way of caring that came out as directness rather than sympathy. "Robert Mitchell, you look like hell warmed over." "Good to see you too, Rebecca." "Emily called ahead, said you were being stubborn about coming in." She stood, came around the desk, and before he could protest, she'd taken his wrist in her hands. Her smile disappeared. "How long has it looked like this?" "Couple days." "Days?" Her voice pitched up. "Robert, this should have brought you in yesterday. Day before that even." She was already walking him toward the exam rooms, not waiting for Dr. Brennan's usual protocol. "Sarah needs to see this right now." The exam room smelled like antiseptic and old magazines, that particular medical office smell that made everyone feel slightly sick even when they weren't. Robert sat on the paper-covered table while Rebecca took his vitals, blood pressure higher than usual, pulse rapid, temperature elevated to 100.2. "Any other symptoms?" she asked, wrapping the blood pressure cuff with efficient movements. "Fever, chills." "Confusion?" "Dreams," he said, then immediately regretted it. "Bad dreams, I mean. Nothing serious." Rebecca's pen paused on her chart. "What kind of dreams?" He shouldn't have mentioned it, shouldn't have opened that door, but there was something about Rebecca's face, the same practical concern she'd shown when bandaging Emily's scraped knees or talking Catherine through her medication schedule, that made honesty feel safer than silence. Places I've never been. Conversations in languages I don't speak. It's probably just stress or a neurological symptom. Dr. Brennan's voice came from the doorway. She entered with that particular walk doctors have, purposeful but not rushed, and her eyes went immediately to his wrist. "May I?" He extended his arm. The bull's-eye rash had grown overnight, now the size of a silver dollar, the dark center raised and hot to the touch. A perfect circle of pale skin surrounded it, then another ring of angry red like ripples frozen in flesh. Dr. Brennan didn't speak for a long moment. She pressed gently around the edges, checked his lymph nodes, looked into his eyes with a penlight. When she finally met his gaze, he saw something that frightened him more than the rash itself. She was afraid. "Robert, I need you to be completely honest with me. Any fever? Night sweats?" "Some." "The dreams, are they vivid? More real than normal dreams?" He hesitated. "Yes." "Do you ever feel confused? Like you're not sure where you are or when you are?" He stopped. The truth was complicated. The truth was that this morning he'd stood in his kitchen and for just a moment couldn't remember if Catherine was alive or dead, if he was 68 or 28, if the year was 2024 or 1968. Sometimes, Dr. Brennan set down her penlight and pulled up a stool, sitting so they were eye level. This was what she'd done with Catherine, right before she'd explained that the cancer had spread, that there were no more treatments, that it was time to talk about hospice. Robert's stomach dropped. "This isn't just Lyme disease," she said carefully. "The progression is too fast, and these neurological symptoms, they're concerning. I'm going to run a full panel, blood work, possibly a lumbar puncture, and I'm calling in a specialist." "A specialist?" "From the CDC. There's been," she chose her words carefully, "unusual activity in the region, several cases with similar presentations. We need to determine exactly what we're dealing with." "Is it dangerous?" The question felt childish the moment he asked it, but he needed to hear her answer. Dr. Brennan's pause told him everything before her words did. "I don't know yet, but I need you to tell me everything you've experienced. Every symptom, every strange moment, everything. Because whatever this is, we're running out of time to figure it out." So he told her about the voice in the woods that sounded like Catherine, about waking up speaking Vietnamese, a language he'd never learned from a war he'd never fought, about the dreams that felt less like imagination and more like memory, like he was remembering someone else's life. Dr. Brennan listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. When he finished, she stood and walked to the window, looking out at Maple Street, where normal people were doing normal things, buying coffee, walking dogs, living lives that made sense. "There's something I need to tell you," she said finally. "About Catherine." Robert's heart stuttered. "What about her?" "Before she died, she made me promise something. She said if you ever came in with symptoms like this, unexplained rash, neurological changes, vivid dreams, I was supposed to call a specific number. She wouldn't tell me why, just that it was important, that someone needed to know." The room seemed to tilt. Catherine knew. She knew this could happen? "I don't know what she knew. She was very sick at the end, Robert. Sometimes the morphine—" She wasn't confused. His voice came out harder than he intended. "Catherine was sharp until the last day. If she told you something, she meant it." Dr. Brennan turned from the window. "Then we need to make that call. Because whatever your wife knew, whatever she was trying to protect you from, I think it's already found you." The blood draw took 15 minutes. Rebecca worked in silence. filling vial after vial with dark red liquid that looked normal, but felt like evidence of something terrible. Dr. Brennan had stepped out to make the call Catherine had requested 7 years ago, speaking in low tones that didn't carry through the walls. Robert sat on the exam table watching his blood fill plastic tubes and tried to remember if Catherine had ever mentioned anything strange, anything unusual in those last weeks. But pain and morphine had made her words soft and scattered, and he'd been so focused on keeping her comfortable that he hadn't pressed for clarity when she'd said cryptic things. Except one thing. One conversation he'd buried because it had seemed like delirium. 3 days before she died, Catherine had gripped his hand with surprising strength and said, "Bobby, if it ever happens to you, if you start remembering things that aren't yours, don't fight it. Just remember who you are. Remember me. That's the only way through." He'd assumed she was talking about grief, about the memories that would haunt him after she was gone. But now, sitting in this exam room with his blood being catalogued like evidence at a crime scene, he wondered if she'd been warning him about something else entirely. The door opened. A man entered behind Dr. Brennan, 50s, wire-rimmed glasses, CDC badge clipped to his white coat. He had the careful movements of someone used to dealing with dangerous things. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Dr. James Whitmore. I specialize in emerging infectious diseases." He didn't offer to shake hands. "I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer them as precisely as possible. Lives may depend on it." Dr. Whitmore didn't sit down. He stood at the counter with a tablet in his hands, swiping through screens with the methodical precision of someone accustomed to documenting things that would later be scrutinized by committees and review boards. "Have you traveled outside the United States in the past 6 months?" he asked. "No." "Any contact with wild animals? Bats, rodents? Anything unusual?" "Just the woods. I walk there every day. Have for 40 years. Dr. Whitmore made a note. "The woods near Moosehead Lake?" "Yes." "Specifically the old logging trails on the eastern shore?" Robert felt something cold settle in his stomach. "How did you know that?" Dr. Whitmore looked up from his tablet. "Because that's where the other 3 were. The other cases." He pulled up a chair now, sat down with the deliberate movement of someone preparing to deliver difficult news. "Mr. Mitchell, your blood work shows severely elevated inflammatory markers. Your white cell count is nearly triple the normal range. Your C-reactive protein levels suggest your body is fighting something significant." "Fighting what?" "That's what concerns me." Dr. Whitmore swiped to a new screen on his tablet, turned it so Robert could see. The image showed what looked like cells under a microscope, round shapes in various shades of purple and blue, but some of them were different, glowing with a strange luminescence even in the still photograph. "These are your T cells," Dr. Whitmore said. "Specifically, your CD4 cells, the ones responsible for coordinating your immune response. They're reacting to something we've never documented before, a protein structure that shouldn't exist in nature, or at least not in any nature we've cataloged." Robert stared at the image. "What does that mean?" "It means whatever bit you, whether it was a tick, a mosquito, or something else, it was carrying a pathogen we haven't identified. Something that's integrating into your cellular structure and rewriting your immune system's response." The room seemed to shrink. Dr. Brennan had moved closer, standing just behind Dr. Whitmore's shoulder, her face carefully neutral in that way doctors have when they're working hard not to show alarm. "Rewriting?" Robert's voice sounded distant to his own ears. "Like cancer?" "No, not cancer." Dr. Whitmore closed the tablet. "Cancer is your own cells reproducing uncontrollably. This is something else. It's more like—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Like your body is being instructed to create something new. Foreign proteins, altered cellular structures. We've seen 3 other cases in the past 6 months. All in this region. All started the same way. A bite, a rash, then rapid neurological symptoms. The cold in Robert's stomach spread to his chest. What happened to them? Dr. Whitmore exchanged a glance with Dr. Brennan. They didn't survive. The longest any of them lasted was 2 weeks from first symptom to death. The world tilted. Robert gripped the edge of the exam table, feeling the paper crinkle under his fingers. 2 weeks? But you're different, Dr. Brennan said quickly, stepping forward. You've already lasted longer than any of them. 3 days with symptoms, and you're still lucid, still functional. That has to mean something. It means his immune system is uniquely suited to whatever this is, Dr. Whitmore said. Or it means the pathogen is adapting, learning. Either way, we need to understand why he's surviving when the others didn't. Robert's mind raced through the implications. 2 weeks. The others had 2 weeks. How many days did that leave him? How many mornings of coffee in the chipped mug? How many sunsets over the lake? How many chances to tell Emily he loved her? What? His voice cracked and he had to start again. What killed them? The others? Doctor. Whitmore's expression grew even more grave. Multiple organ failure, primarily. The pathogen spreads through the lymphatic system to major organs, liver, kidneys, heart. But the neurological symptoms accelerate rapidly. By the end, none of them knew who they were. They were speaking in languages they'd never learned, claiming to remember events they couldn't have witnessed. One woman insisted she'd fought in World War II, even though she was born in 1985. The Vietnamese words from Robert's dream echoed in his mind. Chúng ta phải nhớ? We must remember. But remember what? And why? I need to tell you something, Robert said. The 2 doctors leaned in. My brother, Danny, he died in Vietnam in 1968. Before he died, he sent me letters. Talked about men in his unit getting sick. Said they'd come back from patrols different, speaking languages they didn't know, having memories that weren't theirs. He said the Army was covering it up, calling it battle fatigue or PTSD. But he was convinced it was something else. Something they'd encountered in the jungle. Dr. Whitmore's face had gone very still. Do you still have these letters? One of them. And something else. A vial. A blood sample, I think. Danny sent it to me a week before he died. Said it was from one of the infected soldiers, that someone needed to know the truth. I never knew what to do with it, so I... He stopped, the weight of his next words pressing down on him. Catherine made me promise to hide it, to keep it secret. She said if the government found out, they'd come for us. For Emily. Where is it? Dr. Whitmore's voice had taken on an urgency that bordered on panic. Where is the vial? In my truck, glove compartment. There's a metal case. Dr. Whitmore was already moving toward the door. Dr. Brennan, keep him here. Don't let him leave. He paused in the doorway, looked back at Robert. Mr. Mitchell, if what you're saying is true, if this pathogen has been active since 1968, we're not dealing with an emerging disease. We're dealing with something that's been waiting. Something that's been learning. He disappeared into the hallway. Robert could hear his footsteps, rapid, heading toward the parking lot. Dr. Brennan moved to the exam table, placed a hand on Robert's shoulder. Why didn't you tell anyone about the letters, the vial? Because Catherine begged me not to. His voice broke. She was terrified. Said Danny had told her things before he died, things about what the government did to soldiers who tried to expose the truth. Men who disappeared, records that got erased. She made me swear I'd protect Emily, that I'd never let them find out we knew. He looked up at Dr. Brennan, tears burning in his eyes. I thought she was being paranoid. I thought the cancer medication was making her imagine conspiracies. But what if she was right? What if she knew this could happen to me? Robert, listen to me. Dr. Brennan's voice was firm but gentle. Whatever Catherine knew, whatever she was trying to protect you from, we're past that now. This is happening. The question is what we do next. What can we do? You said the others died. 2 weeks and they were gone. But you're still here. You're lasting longer. That means we have time to figure out why, to find a treatment. I'm not giving up on you, and I sure as hell know Emily won't either. The mention of Emily sent a spike of fear through his chest. She can't know, not yet. She's already been through enough, losing Catherine, watching her die. She'll have to know. She's your next of kin, Robert, and if we need to make decisions about your care. No. His voice came out harder than he intended. I don't want her to watch me die like she watched Catherine. I don't want her last memories of me to be... He couldn't finish. Couldn't articulate the horror of what he'd seen in Dr. Whitmore's face when he described the other patients, their minds disintegrating, their bodies failing. The door burst open. Dr. Whitmore stood there, the metal case in his hands, but his expression had changed. Behind him stood 2 men in dark suits, government agents written in every line of their posture. "Mr. Mitchell," one of them said, voice flat and official, "we need you to come with us." "Like hell," Dr. Brennan stepped between them and Robert. "He's my patient. He's not going anywhere without my consent." The agent pulled out a badge. "Homeland Security. This is a matter of national security. Mr. Mitchell has been in possession of potentially hazardous biological material. He needs to be quarantined and debriefed." "Quarantined?" Robert stood, felt the room spin slightly. "I'm not going anywhere. That vial has been in my truck for 56 years and nobody's gotten sick from it." "Until now," the agent said. "Until you." Dr. Whitmore stepped forward, holding the case carefully like it might explode. "There's something else. The vial, it's not just a blood sample. There's a letter inside, dated 1968. It's from your brother, Mr. Mitchell. I think you need to read it." He opened the case. Inside, nestled in old foam padding, was the small glass vial, barely bigger than Robert's thumb, with a faded brown stain inside. And beneath it, folded into a tiny square, a piece of paper, yellow with age. Robert took the letter with trembling hands. His brother's handwriting, cramped and urgent, filled both sides of the paper. As he read, the room around him seemed to recede, and Danny's voice, dead for 56 years, spoke clearly in his mind. "Bobby, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. The thing in the jungle, the thing that got into Morrison and Chen and half of Charlie Company, it's not what the brass says it is. It's not disease and it's not madness. It's memory, living memory, passed from person to person like a virus. But it's not trying to kill us. It's trying to survive. The VC found something in the ruins near the Cambodian border. Something old, Bobby. Older than any of us can imagine. They used it as a weapon, but they didn't understand it. It doesn't destroy. It preserves. Every man it touches carries the memories of everyone who came before. I've seen things through Morrison's eyes, battles from wars I never fought, places I've never been. And now I know I'm carrying it too. I can feel it changing me, making room for memories that aren't mine. I'm sending you this sample because someone needs to know the truth. But Bobby, and this is important, if it ever happens to you, don't fight it. The men who fought it died screaming. The ones who accepted it, they lived, they changed, but they lived. Remember who you are. That's the only way through. Tell Mom I love her. Take care of your family. And if this thing ever finds you, remember, Bobby. Just remember. The letter fell from Robert's hands. In the silence that followed, he could feel everyone's eyes on him, waiting for his reaction. But all he could think about was Catherine's last words, the ones he'd dismissed as morphine-induced confusion. If you start remembering things that aren't yours, don't fight it. Just remember who you are. She'd known. Somehow, impossibly, Catherine had known this would happen, and she'd tried to prepare him for the only choice that mattered: fight and die, or accept and become something else entirely. The ambulance ride to Portland took 47 minutes. Robert counted every one of them, watching the digital clock on the vehicle's equipment panel tick forward while Emily sat beside him, holding his hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She'd arrived at the clinic just as the Homeland Security agents were trying to escort him out. Dr. Brennan had called her, against protocol, against the agent's orders, but she'd done it anyway because she'd watched Catherine die and knew what it meant to rob someone of their last goodbyes. Emily had planted herself in front of the agents, all 120 pounds of her, and said, with Catherine's voice coming through her 17-year-old throat, "That's my grandfather. You want to take him? You go through me first." They'd compromised. Emily could come, but they were going to Maine Medical Center's isolation wing, and she'd have to follow every protocol, wear every piece of protective equipment they required. She'd agreed without hesitation. Now, in the back of the ambulance, Robert could see her trying not to cry. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but she kept blinking the tears back, kept her breathing steady. She was being strong for him, the way he'd been strong for her when Catherine died, the way Catherine had been strong for both of them when the diagnosis first came. "You should have told me," Emily said quietly. "About Uncle Danny. About the letters." "I know. All this time I thought you were an only child. I thought—" Her voice cracked. "I could have known him through you, through stories. And now, I'm sorry, kiddo." The words felt insufficient, like trying to bail out a sinking boat with a teaspoon. "Your grandmother made me promise. She was so afraid." "Of what? The government? Because they seem pretty interested now anyway." Robert glanced toward the front of the ambulance where one of the agents sat, ostensibly giving them privacy but clearly listening to every word. "Now she was afraid of this, of me getting sick. She knew it could happen somehow. Danny must have told her things before he died, things she never told me." Emily squeezed his hand tighter. "What did the letter say?" "Dr. Brennan wouldn't tell me. Just said it was important, that it changed things." He didn't want to tell her, didn't want to see the fear bloom in her eyes when she understood that her grandfather was carrying something that had killed 3 people, that might kill him too. But she deserved the truth. She'd earned it by standing up to federal agents, by refusing to let him face this alone. "Danny said the pathogen, or whatever this is, it carries memory. The memories of everyone who's been infected. He said if it happens to me, I shouldn't fight it. That fighting is what kills people. That acceptance is the only way through." Emily was quiet for a long moment, processing. When she finally spoke, her voice was steadier than he expected. "So you're saying to survive this, you have to let it change you?" That's what Danny thought, what Catherine believed. And the other 3 people who died, they fought it? Dr. Whitmore didn't say, but if Danny was right, then the treatment is what killed them. Emily's grip on his hand loosened slightly, her mind working through the implications. The doctors tried to cure them, to stop the infection, and that's what caused the organ failure. Robert nodded slowly. His granddaughter had always been sharp, always able to see patterns others missed. It was why she'd excel at marine biology, why she'd probably end up discovering something important someday if he lived long enough to see it. The ambulance pulled into the hospital's emergency bay. Through the rear windows, Robert could see a team waiting, all in full protective gear, hazmat suits and face shields, like he was carrying something that could end the world. Maybe he was... They wheeled him through corridors he'd walked before when Catherine was dying, but everything looked different from a gurney. The ceiling tiles passed overhead like frames in a film, fluorescent lights strobing by. Emily walked beside him, still holding his hand, until they reached a set of double doors marked Isolation Ward. Authorized personnel only. An agent stepped between them. "This is as far as you go." "No." Emily's voice was steel. "I'm not leaving him. It's not safe. I don't care." She looked down at Robert, and he saw Catherine in every line of her face. "I'm not leaving. Not like last time. Not again." Dr. Brennan appeared, suited up in protective gear. "Let her through. Get her suited up. She stays with him." The agent started to protest, but Dr. Brennan cut him off. "He's stable right now, but we don't know how long that will last. If we're going to understand why he's surviving when the others didn't, we need him calm, cooperative." "She helps with that. She stays." They suited Emily up in the hallway. Yellow Tyvek suit, double gloves, N95 mask under a face shield. She looked absurd, a child playing dress-up in adult clothes, but she walked through those doors without hesitation. The isolation room was antiseptic and cold. Machines lined one wall, monitors, IV stands, equipment Robert couldn't name. They transferred him to the bed, started hooking him up to various monitors. His heartbeat echoed through speakers, too fast, too irregular. Dr. Whitmore entered, already suited up. Behind his face shield, his eyes were troubled. "Mr. Mitchell, we need to run more tests. Blood work, imaging, possibly a biopsy of the affected tissue. I won't lie to you, some of this will be uncomfortable, but we need to understand what we're dealing with. Do what you need to do." Robert's voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. "There's something else." Dr. Whitmore pulled up a chair, sat down heavily. "The vial your brother sent, we analyzed it. The pathogen inside is still viable after 56 years. It's dormant but not dead, and it's genetically identical to what we found in your blood." Emily made a small sound. Robert couldn't tell if it was fear or understanding or both. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means this isn't a new outbreak. It means whatever your brother encountered in Vietnam has been waiting. The question is, waiting for what? And why did it activate now in you after all these years?" Robert's mind went back to the woods, to the trail he walked every week with Emily. The same trail he'd walked for 40 years without incident. What had changed? What had triggered this dormant thing to wake up? "The Henderson's dog," Emily said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "Mrs. Henderson said it got sick after going into the woods, acting confused, staring at nothing. What if it's not just Grandpa? What if there's something in those woods activating the pathogen?" Dr. Whitmore stood quickly. "What woods? Specifically where?" "The old logging trails on Moosehead Lake," Robert said. "Eastern shore. There's a clearing about 2 miles in where—" He stopped, remembering. "Where there used to be a camp, Vietnam era. They used it for training exercises before shipping soldiers overseas. Danny trained there before he deployed." The room went silent except for the beeping of monitors. "Jesus Christ," Dr. Whitmore breathed. "They brought it back. The soldiers who came back from Vietnam, the ones who were infected, they went through that training camp. They would have been there, in those woods, shedding the pathogen into the soil, the water. It's been there for 56 years, dormant, waiting for the right conditions." "What conditions?" Dr. Brennan asked. "Climate change, temperature shifts, changing migration patterns." Dr. Whitmore was pacing now, his mind racing. "The CDC warnings about tick season. It's not just about ticks. The whole ecosystem is changing, and whatever's been sleeping in that soil is waking up. Mr. Mitchell, how often do you walk those trails? Every week for 40 years. And your brother? Did he ever walk them with you? Before he deployed? Robert felt something cold spread through his chest. Yes. We used to hunt there as kids. He showed me the trails, said it was good luck to walk them before shipping out. Said it kept him connected to home. So you're genetically related to someone who carried the pathogen. You've been regularly exposed to the dormant source for decades. And now, with environmental conditions changing, Dr. Whitmore stopped pacing, looked at Robert with something like awe. You're not just infected, you're compatible. Your body recognizes this pathogen because it's been primed for it your entire life. That's why you're surviving. That's why you're lasting longer. But the others? Emily asked. The 3 who died? Wrong genetic profile, probably. Wrong exposure history. Their bodies tried to fight it as a foreign invader, but Mr. Mitchell's body... He gestured at the monitor showing Robert's elevated but stable vitals. His body knows what to do with it. It's not fighting. It's integrating. The word hung in the air like a threat. Integrating. Becoming something other than what he was. Robert looked at Emily, saw the fear in her eyes that she was trying so hard to hide. What happens now? He asked. Dr. Whitmore's expression grew grave. Now we wait. We monitor. And we hope that your body's acceptance of this pathogen doesn't change you so much that... He stopped. Couldn't finish. That I stop being me, Robert finished for him. That's what you're afraid of. That I'll survive, but I won't be Robert Mitchell anymore. No one answered. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Outside the isolation room, through the glass walls, Robert could see agents and doctors conferring, pointing at charts, arguing in pantomime. Emily leaned close, her voice barely a whisper through the mask. Grandpa, I don't care what you become. I don't care if you remember things that aren't yours or speak languages you never learned. You're still you. You're still the person who taught me to fish, who makes terrible pancakes, who cries at old movies and pretends he's not. That doesn't change because your cells are different. Robert wanted to believe her, wanted to think that identity was more than biology, that the self could persist through transformation. But he'd seen what this did to the others, heard Dr. Whitmore describe them speaking in tongues, claiming memories from lives they'd never lived. If he survived, and that was still a large if, would he remember Emily? Would he remember Catherine? Or would he wake up one day to find those memories buried under layers of others, strangers' lives piled on top of his own until he couldn't find himself anymore? The monitor's beeping suddenly changed pitch. His heart rate was climbing, not dangerously, but noticeably. Dr. Brennan was at his side immediately, checking readings. Robert, I need you to stay calm. Your vitals are spiking. But he wasn't afraid. That was the strange thing. He felt oddly peaceful, like he was standing at the edge of something vast and watching it approach without panic. The burn in his wrist had faded to a dull throb. His vision, which had been blurring on and off for days, suddenly crystallized into perfect clarity. And in that clarity, he remembered something Catherine had said, not at the end but earlier when she still had good days between the bad ones. They'd been sitting on the porch watching the sunset, and she'd said, Bobby, promise me something. When I'm gone, don't let grief make you small. Don't shrink yourself to fit the shape of what's missing. Expand. Remember. Carry it forward. At the time, he'd thought she meant remember her, carry her memory forward. But maybe she'd meant something else. Maybe she'd known this was coming, and she'd been trying to tell him that memory, all memory, even memories that weren't originally his, was a gift, not a curse, a way of carrying people forward, keeping them alive through remembering. "I think I understand," he said quietly. Emily leaned in closer. Danny said not to fight it. Catherine said, "Remember who you are." They weren't contradicting each other. They were saying the same thing. Let the memories come, but don't let them erase you. Hold on to yourself while making room for others. "Can you do that?" Emily asked. "Is that even possible?" Robert looked at his granddaughter, 17 years old, wearing a hazmat suit, refusing to leave his side. If Catherine could hold on to her grace through the agony of cancer, if Danny could write that letter knowing he was dying, if Emily could stand up to federal agents for love of her grandfather, then maybe he could do this impossible thing too. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm going to try." The monitors steadied. Dr. Brennan checked the readings again, frowned. "His vitals are normalizing, heart rate coming down, blood pressure stabilizing. Whatever just happened." "He made a choice," Dr. Whitmore said quietly. "Consciously or not, he decided to accept this." And his body responded. Through the glass, Robert could see more people gathering, more agents, more doctors, someone with a camera. He was becoming a case study, a medical curiosity, a potential threat, or a potential breakthrough depending on how you looked at it. But in this moment, in this sterile room with Emily holding his hand and machines singing the song of his changing body, he was still Robert Mitchell. And husband to Catherine, brother to Danny, grandfather to Emily. And if he had to become something more to stay alive, something that carried memories of strangers alongside his own, well, maybe that wasn't the worst thing. Maybe that was just another way of being human, of refusing to let the dead stay forgotten. The question was whether he'd still be able to tell the difference when all those memories crashed together between what he'd lived and what he'd inherited. Whether he'd still know which life was his own. The seizure came at 4:17 a.m. on the 5th day. Emily had been dozing in the chair beside his bed, her head tilted at an angle that would leave her neck sore, when the monitor's shrieking jerked her awake. Robert's body had gone rigid, back arching off the mattress with such force that the restraints, added on day 3 as a precaution, cut into his wrists and ankles. His eyes were open, but rolled back, showing only whites. A thin line of blood traced from where he'd bitten his tongue. "Code Blue! Isolation Room 4!" The intercom crackled to life. Within seconds, Dr. Brennan crashed through the door, already gloved and masked, Dr. Whitmore right behind her. Emily was pushed back against the wall, watching in horror as her grandfather convulsed, as the machines screamed their warnings, as doctors shouted medical terminology that sounded like a foreign language designed specifically for catastrophe. "Push 2 of lorazepam. His heart rate's at 180. Temperature's spiking, 104.7 and climbing." They worked with practiced efficiency, but Emily could see the fear beneath their professionalism. This wasn't supposed to happen. Robert had been stable for 3 days. His vitals had normalized. They'd thought he was integrating the pathogen successfully, thought he might be the first to survive. But now his body was betraying him, or the pathogen was finishing what it had started, or both. Emily couldn't tell which and wasn't sure it mattered. The seizure lasted 93 seconds. She counted every one. When it finally stopped, Robert lay motionless except for the rapid rise and fall of his chest. The monitors settled into a frantic but steady rhythm. Dr. Brennan checked his pupils with a penlight, her hands shaking slightly despite her outward calm. "Responsive," she said. "Pupils equal and reactive. But we need to intubate." His airways compromised. "No." The word came from Robert, barely a whisper but clear enough. "No tube." Dr. Brennan leaned closer. "Robert, you can't breathe properly on your own right now. We need to—" "Let me decide." Each word cost him effort. "Not your choice." Emily pushed past the nurses to his side. "Grandpa, please, let them help you." His eyes found hers, and what she saw there stopped her cold. They were still his eyes, still that particular shade of gray-blue that reminded her of winter sky. But there was something else now, a depth that hadn't been there before, like looking into water and realizing it goes down farther than you thought, that there are things moving in the darkness below. "Emily." His hand moved weakly toward hers and she grabbed it. "Promise me something, anything. If I change, if I'm not me anymore." He struggled for breath. "Don't let them keep me alive, just for study, just to understand." "Let me go." "Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine. Promise." His grip tightened with surprising strength. "Catherine made me promise things. Now, you promise me." The room had gone quiet except for the monitors. Everyone was waiting for her answer, a 17-year-old girl being asked to make a choice no one should have to make. "I promise," she whispered, and felt something break inside her chest. Robert's grip loosened. His eyes closed. Dr. Brennan immediately moved in with the intubation equipment, but Dr. Whitmore stopped her with a hand on her arm. "Wait," he said quietly. "Look at his vitals." Emily looked at the monitors. Robert's heart rate was slowing, not crashing, but normalizing. His temperature was dropping. His oxygen saturation, which had plummeted during the seizure, was climbing back toward acceptable levels. "He's stabilizing," Dr. Brennan said, disbelief evident in her voice. "On his own. Without intervention. It's the pathogen," Dr. Whitmore said. "It's protecting him, keeping him alive through the integration process." He turned to look at Emily. "Your grandfather isn't just surviving this. He's adapting to it. His body's learning to work with it rather than against it. But the seizure was the pathogen spreading to his central nervous system, the final stage of integration. He should be dead right now, or brain dead at minimum. Instead, he's—" Dr. Whitmore stopped, shook his head. "I don't have words for what he is." Emily looked down at her grandfather. His breathing had steadied. The blood on his chin had been wiped away by a nurse. He looked peaceful almost, like he was simply sleeping after a hard day's work. But she knew he wasn't sleeping. He was somewhere else, somewhere inside himself where the boundaries between his memories and others were dissolving, where Robert Mitchell was becoming something more and possibly something less. The hours that followed were the longest of Emily's life. She sat in that chair and watched the sun come up through the isolation room's single window, watched the shift changes, watched doctors come and go with increasingly baffled expressions. Robert didn't wake. His vitals remained stable but not normal, his heart rate slightly too slow, his body temperature slightly too low, like he was conserving energy for some massive internal process. On the 6th day, Dr. Whitmore called her into a conference room. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, which was probably true. Behind him, on a screen, was a scan of Robert's brain. Emily recognized it from her biology classes, the distinctive shape of the cerebral cortex, the dark ventricles. "I need to show you something," Dr. Whitmore said. "And I need you to understand that we're in completely uncharted territory here." He pulled up another scan, placed it beside the first. "This is your grandfather's brain from 3 days ago. This is from this morning. Do you see the difference?" Emily stared at the images. She wasn't a doctor, but even she could see it. The second scan showed more neural pathways lighting up, more activity in regions that had been dim before. It looked like someone had turned on lights in a house where most rooms had been dark. What does it mean? It means his brain is reorganizing itself, creating new connections, activating dormant areas. The pathogen isn't destroying neural tissue, it's enhancing it, building new pathways for the memories it's carrying. Emily felt sick. You mean he's making room for the other people's memories? Yes. But here's what's remarkable and terrifying. Dr. Whitmore zoomed in on a section of the scan. These areas here, these are associated with personal identity, with sense of self. In the other 3 patients, these areas went dark. Their sense of who they were got erased. But in your grandfather, they're glowing brighter than ever. He's not losing himself. He struggled for the right word. He's expanding, making room for the new memories while strengthening his own identity to anchor them. Is that even possible? Apparently it is. We just don't know at what cost. Dr. Whitmore closed the laptop. Emily, I need to prepare you for the possibility that when your grandfather wakes up, if he wakes up, he may not be entirely the person you knew. He'll have memories of things he never experienced, knowledge he never learned. He might speak languages, know facts, remember events from lives he never lived. The question is whether Robert Mitchell will still be there underneath all of that, or whether he'll be buried under the weight of all those other people. Emily thought of her grandmother, of the way Catherine had gripped Robert's hand and said, "Remember who you are." She'd known. Somehow, Catherine had known this exact moment would come, had known the choice Robert would face. "He'll be there," Emily said with more confidence than she felt. "He promised Grandma. He promised me. And my grandfather keeps his promises." Dr. Whitmore gave her a sad smile. "I hope you're right." That night, Emily sat in the isolation room and talked to her unconscious grandfather. She told him about her day, about the terrible cafeteria coffee, about the nurse who reminded her of Catherine. She told him about the marine biology program she was applying to, about the research on coral reefs she wanted to do. She talked until her voice went hoarse, trying to create a thread of sound that would lead him back to himself. At 11:47 p.m., exactly 1 week after this had all started, Robert's eyes opened. Emily grabbed his hand. "Grandpa?" He turned his head slowly, looking at her with those strange, deep eyes. For a terrible moment she thought he didn't recognize her, thought the thing wearing her grandfather's face was someone else entirely. Then he spoke, his voice rough from disuse, but unmistakably his. "Hey, kiddo, you waited." "Of course I waited, you stubborn old—" Her voice broke. "Of course I waited. Good girl." His hand squeezed hers weakly. "Still me, mostly. But Emily, there are others here, too. In here." He tapped his temple with his free hand. "I can feel them. Remember them. Like watching 1,000 movies all at once, but I'm in them. Living them." "Can you tell them apart? Your memories from theirs?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes. Danny's are easiest. We shared so much already. The others are harder, but I can feel the difference. Like knowing which thoughts are yours and which are just songs stuck in your head. Same space, different source." Dr. Brennan entered, drawn by the alerts that Robert had regained consciousness. She ran through a battery of tests, checking his responses, his memory, his cognitive function. He answered every question correctly, knew the date, knew where he was, knew Emily's name and his own. But when she asked him to count backward from 100 by sevens, something strange happened. He started in English, 100, 93, 86. Then switched seamlessly to Vietnamese without seeming to notice, continued for several numbers, then shifted to what sounded like Korean before catching himself and switching back to English. "I'm sorry," he said, looking embarrassed. "I didn't mean to. They just come out sometimes. The other languages. I know them now like I've always known them. 3 languages I never studied. And they're just there. Dr. Whitmore, who had rushed in when he heard Robert was awake, stared at him with something like awe. "Mr. Mitchell, can you tell me what you remember?" "About the pathogen, the integration process?" Robert's expression grew distant. "I remember. Everyone. Every person it touched. The soldiers in Vietnam who got infected first. The way it felt when it entered them, like cold water in their veins. I remember Danny dying, actually dying, the moment his heart stopped. I remember the 3 people here, in this hospital, the ones who fought it. I felt them die too, felt their fear, their confusion, their organs shutting down one by one." Emily's hand tightened on his. "Grandpa, I remember Morrison. He was in Danny's unit. He had a daughter named Sarah. She'd be 62 now if she's still alive. He died thinking about her birthday, hoping someone would remember to send her a card." Robert's eyes focused on Emily. "That's what this is. The pathogen. It's not trying to kill. It's trying to preserve. Every person it touches, it saves their memories, their last thoughts, their loves and fears and hopes. It's an archive of the forgotten, carried forward in the living." "But 3 people died," Dr. Brennan said gently. "Here, under our care." Robert's face crumpled. "Because you tried to cure them. The pathogen can't complete integration if it's being attacked. It's like," he searched for words, "like trying to build a house while someone's tearing down the walls. You can't fight it and survive it. You have to accept it. Let it finish. Danny knew. Catherine knew. They tried to tell me and they tried to tell you, but—" He stopped, looked at Dr. Whitmore with terrible clarity. "You killed them. Trying to save them. You killed them. And I—" His voice broke. "I carry their deaths now. I remember dying 3 times, 3 different ways. I know what it feels like to drown in your own blood, to feel your brain misfiring, to slip away while strangers in hazmat suits stare at you like you're a specimen." The silence that followed was devastating. "Doctor." Whitmore looked like he'd been struck. Dr. Brennan had tears in her eyes. "We didn't know," Dr. Whitmore whispered. "I know," Robert said. "They knew too at the end. They didn't blame you. But they're dead anyway, and I'm alive, and I'll carry that forever. Their last moments, their terror, their forgiveness." He looked at Emily. "Is that what you want, kiddo? A grandfather who remembers dying? Who speaks in dead men's voices? Who carries ghosts?" Emily climbed onto the bed beside him, careful of the IVs and monitors, and put her head on his shoulder the way she had as a child. "I want my grandfather. However he comes, whatever he carries, you're still you. And that's enough." Robert's arm came around her, and she felt him shaking, with exhaustion or emotion or the aftermath of transformation, she couldn't tell. "I hope so," he whispered. "God, I hope so." The revelation came not from Dr. Whitmore or Dr. Brennan, but from Agent Thomas Parker, who appeared in the isolation room on the 8th day with a file folder that looked like it had been sealed since before Emily was born. Robert was sitting up now, able to eat soft foods, though he complained that everything tasted wrong. "Like I'm eating through someone else's memory of taste," he'd said, which made no medical sense but seemed to make perfect sense to him. Parker stood at the foot of the bed, his government-issue suit looking rumpled after days of camping out in the hospital. "Mr. Mitchell, I need to tell you something. About your wife. About Catherine." Emily tensed. Robert's hand found hers automatically. "What about her?" Robert's voice was calm, but Emily could feel his pulse racing through their joined hands. Parker opened the file. Catherine Morrison, born 1954 in Da Nang, South Vietnam. Came to the United States in 1973 as a war refugee. Changed her name from Lynn Morrison when she naturalized in 1976. He looked up. Your wife wasn't just American, Mr. Mitchell. She was Vietnamese. And Morrison, that was your brother Danny's last name before you inherited it. The room seemed to tilt. Emily looked at her grandfather, saw his face go pale, saw something like recognition and denial wore across his features. That's impossible, Robert whispered. Catherine was from Portland. She told me, she said she grew up in Maine, that her parents were her adoptive parents, Parker said gently. Catherine was Danny Morrison's translator in Vietnam. She worked with his unit. She was there when the pathogen outbreak happened. She saw what it did to the soldiers, including your brother. And when Danny knew he was dying, he didn't just send you a letter and a vial. He sent you Catherine. Asked her to find you, to protect you, to make sure the truth survived even if he didn't. Emily felt her grandfather's hand go limp in hers. She watched 46 years of marriage rearrange themselves in his mind, watched every memory recontextualize, every conversation gain new meaning. She knew, Robert said hollowly. From the beginning, she knew what I was at risk for, what the pathogen could do. She spent 46 years watching me, waiting to see if I'd get infected, preparing for the moment when... He stopped, looked at Parker with sudden fury. Why didn't she tell me? Why did she lie? Because Danny made her promise. Parker pulled out another document, a letter. Robert could see Danny's handwriting even from across the room. He wrote to her after he wrote to you. Told her that if you knew the truth, knew that she'd been sent to watch over you, knew about her connection to Vietnam, you'd never trust her, never love her. And he needed you to love her, Mr. Mitchell. And because love was the only thing that could anchor you if the pathogen ever activated. Love was the only memory strong enough to hold on to when all the other memories came flooding in. The machines monitoring Robert's vitals started beeping, heart rate climbing, blood pressure spiking. Dr. Brennan moved toward him, but he waved her away. Read it, he said to Parker. Read me my brother's letter. Parker's voice was steady as he read, Bobby, if you're reading this, it means Catherine found you like I asked her to. By now you probably love her. I hope you do. She's the best person I've ever known, and she deserves to be loved honestly, not just as a guard dog for my little brother. But here's the truth. I'm sending her to you because I'm scared. Scared that what's in my blood might be in yours too. We're brothers. We have the same genes. If this thing activates in you someday, you'll need what I needed. Someone who understands, who knows the truth, who can guide you through it. Catherine knows. She's seen it all. And she's agreed to spend her life making sure you're safe, making sure you're loved, making sure that if the worst happens, you won't face it alone. I know this sounds crazy. I know you'll think I've lost my mind. Maybe I have. But Bobby, trust me on this. Love her. Really love her. Not because I'm asking, but because she's worth it. And if the time comes when you need to know the truth, she'll tell you. She promised. Just remember, she didn't choose this to deceive you. She chose it to save you. That's what love is. That's what we do for family. The silence after Parker finished reading was absolute. Emily watched her grandfather process this, saw him cycle through shock, betrayal, anger, and finally, heartbreakingly, understanding. Tears tracked down his weathered face. She loved me, he said quietly. Really loved me, not just because Danny asked. I know she did. I felt it every day for 46 years. Of course she did, Parker said. The mission might have brought her to you, but she stayed because she wanted to. She married you because she loved you. Everything after that first meeting was real, Mr. Mitchell. Your brother gave her a reason to find you. You gave her a reason to stay." Robert looked at Emily, and in his eyes she saw layers upon layers, his own grief, Catherine's hidden truth, Danny's desperate hope, and now she realized the memories of all those other people he carried, all those loves and losses and secrets piled on top of each other. "Your grandmother," he said to Emily, "was the bravest person I've ever known. She lived a lie to protect a truth. She watched me for 50 years, waiting to see if I'd get sick, preparing to guide me through it. And when her time came, when the cancer took her, she still tried to protect me, tried to prepare me. She knew, Emily. She always knew. But she loved you," Emily said firmly. "Grandpa, she loved you. I saw it every day. That wasn't fake. That wasn't duty. That was real." Robert nodded, wiping his eyes. "I know. God help me, I know. I can feel it now. Her love mixed with everything else I'm carrying. It's the strongest thing in here. The brightest memory. Danny was right. It's the anchor. It's what's keeping me from getting lost." Parker closed the file. "There's more, Mr. Mitchell. The government. We weren't covering this up. We were trying to understand it. Catherine was one of our consultants. She spent years helping us research the pathogen, trying to find a cure or a treatment. She's the reason we knew to look for genetic markers. She's the reason we understood the integration process. Everything we know about how to help people like you, we learned from her." "The 3 who died," Robert said suddenly, "Catherine would have known how to save them. If she'd still been alive, if she'd been here." "She left protocols," Dr. Whitmore said, stepping forward. "Detailed notes on the integration process, on what to do and what not to do, but they were classified, buried in bureaucracy. We didn't find them until after the 3rd patient died. If we'd had them sooner—" He stopped, unable to finish. Robert's laugh was bitter. "So my wife spent her life preparing to save me, left instructions to save others, and you government types let people die because the paperwork was filed wrong?" "Yes," Parker said simply, "and we'll have to live with that. Just like you're living with their memories. Just like Dr. Whitmore lives with the knowledge that his treatments killed them. We're all carrying weight we didn't ask for, Mr. Mitchell. That's the price of this mess." Emily felt something shift in the room, a collective acknowledgement of shared guilt, shared grief, shared responsibility. Her grandfather wasn't the only victim here. He wasn't the only one changed by this pathogen and the secret surrounding it. "What happens now?" she asked. "To Grandpa? To the pathogen? To all of this?" Dr. Whitmore exchanged glances with Parker, then with Dr. Brennan. "That depends on your grandfather. Mr. Mitchell, you're the first person to successfully integrate the pathogen while maintaining your identity. You're proof that survival is possible. The question is, what do we do with that knowledge?" "You want to study me," Robert said flatly. "Keep me here, run tests, figure out how to replicate what happened." "We want to help others," Dr. Brennan corrected. "There's a possibility, small but real, that there are other genetic carriers out there. People with the same markers you have, walking the same trails, breathing the same air. If the environmental conditions that activated the pathogen in you are spreading, there could be more cases. We need to understand how to guide them through integration instead of killing them with treatment." Robert was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands, the same hands that had held Catherine's through 46 years of secret keeping, that had built their cabin board by board, that now carried the cellular memory of dozens of strangers. "I'll help," he said finally, "but on conditions. First, Emily is involved in everything. Every decision, every test, every protocol. She's not left in the dark like I was, like Catherine was. Second, when we figure this out, and we will figure this out, the information goes public. No more classified files, no more buried protocols. People deserve to know the truth. And third, his voice hardened, you find Morrison's daughter, Sarah Morrison. And you find her and you tell her that her father's last thought was of her birthday, that he died loving her, that someone remembered. Parker nodded slowly. We can do that. Then we have a deal. Robert looked at Emily. What do you think, kiddo? Want to be part of a medical revolution? Or do you want to run as far from this mess as possible? I wouldn't blame you either way. Emily thought about her grandmother, brave, secretive Catherine who'd crossed an ocean and lived a lie to protect the man she loved. Thought about her great-uncle Danny who'd sent his translator to watch over his brother even as he was dying. Thought about the 3 patients whose deaths her grandfather now carried, whose memories would be lost if this pattern repeated. I think Grandma didn't spend her whole life protecting you just so I could walk away now, Emily said. I'm in. We do this together. We make sure no one else dies because the truth is buried in a classified file. Robert pulled her close, and for a moment they just held each other. Grandfather and granddaughter, carriers of different kinds of memory, bound together by love and loss and the stubborn Mitchell refusal to let the dead stay forgotten. Catherine would be proud of you, Robert whispered. She'd be proud of both of us, Emily replied. Dr. Whitmore cleared his throat. There's one more thing. Mr. Mitchell, in Catherine's files, there was a letter addressed to you. She requested it be given to you only if the pathogen activated, only if you survived integration. He pulled an envelope from his pocket, yellow with age, Catherine's handwriting on the front. For Bobby, when he remembers. Robert took it with trembling hands. For a moment Emily thought he wouldn't be able to open it, that the weight of one more truth would be too much. But then he carefully tore the seal, pulled out the folded paper, and read his dead wife's final message. His face crumpled. Tears fell on the page, smudging ink that was already decades old. When he finished, he handed it to Emily without a word. She read, My dearest Bobby, if you're reading this, it means I failed to keep you safe. It means the thing we feared has found you, and you've had to face it without me. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth. I'm sorry I let you love me thinking I was someone I wasn't. But Bobby, everything else was real. Every laugh, every fight, every quiet morning with coffee, every sunset on the porch. That was us. That was real. You made me real. You gave me a life worth living, a love worth keeping secret for. And if you survive this, if you make it through the integration that took Danny and so many others, it will be because of that love. Because what we built together is stronger than what any pathogen can build in your cells. Stay you, Bobby. Stay the man who makes terrible pancakes and cries at old movies. Stay the man who keeps his promises and loves fiercely and refuses to let go. The memories you carry now, Danny's, the others, they're gifts, not curses. They're people who want to be remembered. But don't let them crowd you out. There's room for all of you. I know because I carried my own secrets alongside our love for 46 years, and there was always room. Always. I love you. I loved you from the moment I met you, mission be damned. And I'll love you beyond death, beyond memory, beyond whatever comes next. Remember me, Bobby. But remember yourself first. Always yourself first. Your Lynn, your Catherine, your love. Emily handed the letter back, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Her grandfather folded it carefully, pressed it against his chest. She knew I'd make it, he said wonderingly. She believed I was strong enough, that our love was strong enough. She was right, Dr. Brennan said softly. You're here. You're alive. You're still you. That's not medical miracle, Mr. Mitchell. That's love. That's the strongest force we've encountered in all of this. And in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by machines and monitors and government agents and doctors who'd tried their best and failed, Robert Mitchell made his choice, not to fight and not to surrender, but to carry, to bear the weight of memory, truth, and love forward into whatever came next. To be both himself and more than himself. To prove that the dead don't have to stay forgotten and the living don't have to face transformation alone. To honor Catherine's sacrifice by becoming what she always believed he could be, strong enough to hold it all, brave enough to stay human through it, wise enough to know the difference. 5 years later, the morning came soft and golden to Moosehead Lake. Robert Mitchell stood on his porch, the same porch Catherine had insisted on painting white every 3 years, the same porch where they'd watched 1,000 sunsets together and buttoned his blue shirt. Thursday. Some rituals never changed, even when everything else did. The cabin looked the same from the outside. Same weathered boards, same green shutters, same tin roof that sang when it rained. But inside, things had shifted in small ways that made the space feel both familiar and renewed. Photos now covered an entire wall, not just of Catherine and Emily, but of soldiers Robert had never met in person. Morrison with his daughter Sarah. Chen standing with his platoon, Danny in his dress uniform, young and serious and alive. Each photo had a story, and Robert remembered them all now. Not as distant facts, but as lived experience, as real as his own memories of learning to fish with his father, or dancing with Catherine at their wedding. The screen door opened, and Emily stepped out, carrying 2 cups of coffee. At 22, she'd grown into someone who looked startlingly like Catherine. Same determined set to her jaw, same way of holding worry close but not letting it show. She was in her final year at the University of Maine now, studying what she called pathogenic memory integration, a field that hadn't existed until she'd more or less invented it. "You're up early," she said, handing him a cup. "Couldn't sleep, too many dreams." He smiled to show he meant it kindly. Not bad ones, just full. Chan was teaching his daughter to swim. I was there, watching through his eyes. It was beautiful. Emily settled into the chair beside him. They'd had this conversation in various forms hundreds of times over the past 5 years, Robert describing the memories that surfaced, Emily taking mental notes, both of them marveling at the strangeness and wonder of it all. "Dr. Brennan called yesterday," Emily said. "Another case. A woman in Vermont, same genetic markers as you. She walked the trails near an old training site. Started showing symptoms 2 days ago." Robert's grip tightened slightly on his mug. "Is she fighting it?" "Not anymore. We got there in time. Showed her your videos, your documentation, explained the integration process. She's scared, but she's accepting it. Dr. Whitmore thinks she'll make it through." "That's 7, Robert said quietly. 7 survivors in 5 years, better odds than we started with. Thanks to you." Emily looked at him with fierce pride. "Thanks to Grandma. Thanks to everyone who refused to let the truth stay buried." The truth had indeed come out, though not without resistance. It had taken congressional hearings, media pressure, and more than a few threatened lawsuits before the CDC finally declassified Catherine's research and Danny's letters. The pathogen, officially designated as mnemonic integration syndrome now, though Robert still thought of it as the thing Danny found, was acknowledged, studied, and finally understood. Not everyone accepted it. There were still people who thought it was a hoax, who insisted the survivors were faking their symptoms or had been brainwashed. But for those who needed the information, those rare individuals with the right genetic markers who lived near the right soil conditions, it was there, available, life-saving. "Sarah Morrison is coming today," Emily said. "She wanted to meet you, to hear about her father." Robert nodded. He'd been preparing for this meeting for 5 years, carrying Morrison's memories like letters waiting to be delivered. Sarah would be 67 now, older than her father had been when he died, older than Robert had been when this all started. "What do I tell her?" he asked. "How do I explain that I remember her father loving her, remember him dying thinking of her, but I'm not him. I'm just—" He gestured helplessly. "The mailman. The delivery system for someone else's last thoughts." "You tell her the truth," Emily said firmly, "that her father loved her, that his last thought was making sure she knew it, that love doesn't die just because the person carrying it does. It gets passed on, carried forward, remembered. That's what you are, Grandpa. You're proof that love survives." A car pulled up the gravel drive, Dr. Brennan's sensible sedan. She'd become something of a fixture in their lives, checking on Robert monthly, documenting his progress, learning from him how to guide others through integration. She emerged from the driver's seat, and from the passenger side came a woman with gray hair and Morrison's eyes. Sarah Morrison walked slowly up the porch steps, studying Robert's face with the intensity of someone looking for ghosts. When she reached the top, she stopped. "You have his eyes," she said quietly. "Not the color, the way you look, like you're seeing more than what's in front of you." "He loved you very much," Robert said, because it was true, and because he could feel Morrison's love even now, decades old but undimmed. "He thought about you at the end, about your birthday. He wanted someone to remember." Sarah's face crumpled. "I was 8 when he died. I barely remember him, just fragments. His laugh, the way he smelled like cigarettes and aftershave. The song he used to sing when he thought no one was listening." She looked at Robert with desperate hope. Can you remember that? The song?" Robert closed his eyes. Let Morrison's memories surface, sorted through decades of experience that wasn't his until he found it. A man in jungle fatigues, humming while he cleaned his rifle, thinking of a little girl in pigtails waiting for him at home. He hummed the melody, "You Send Me," the same song that had played at his wedding to Catherine, the same song Danny had loved. The universe had strange symmetries sometimes. Sarah sobbed once, pressed her hand to her mouth. "That's it. That's the song. Oh God, he's really in there, isn't he? My father is really in your memory." "Part of him," Robert said gently. "The part that loved you, the part that wanted to come home. That's what the pathogen preserved, not his whole self. That's gone, and I'm sorry for it. But the love, that's here. That's real. And if you want to know it, I can share it." They sat on the porch for hours. Robert told Sarah everything Morrison had wanted her to know. How proud he'd been when she was born, how he'd carried her photo through every patrol, how his buddies had teased him for talking about her constantly. He told her about Morrison's last day, the ambush, the realization that he wouldn't make it home. And he told her about Morrison's final thought, crystal clear in Robert's integrated memory. "Sarah. My Sarah. Someone tell her I loved her. Tell her Daddy loved her." When Sarah finally left, she hugged Robert, tight and fierce like he was a life raft in deep water. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for carrying him. Thank you for remembering." After she drove away, Emily and Dr. Brennan came back to the porch where Robert sat, drained but peaceful. "That was beautiful," Dr. Brennan said. "What you gave her, closure, connection, proof that her father's love survived. That's not medicine." "Yeah, that's something else. Something we can't quantify or replicate, but it's real." "It's what Catherine wanted," Robert said. "Why she spent her life preparing me for this. She knew that if I survived integration, I could be a bridge between the dead and the living, between the forgotten and the remembered." Emily sat beside him, took his hand. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" Really okay? Not just surviving, but living? It was the question she asked most often, and he loved her for it. Loved that she understood the difference between existence and life, between carrying weight and being crushed by it. "I'm good, kiddo," he said honestly. "Some days are harder than others. Some days I wake up and have to remind myself which memories are mine and which are borrowed. But yeah, I'm good. Better than I expected to be." "Do you still miss Grandma?" Emily's voice was small. "Or do all the other memories make it hard to—" "I miss her every single day," Robert interrupted firmly. "The other memories don't diminish that. If anything, they make it stronger. Because I don't just remember loving Catherine through my own experience. I remember watching Danny love her like a sister. I remember Morrison seeing photos of her and thinking she looked kind. I remember Chen meeting her once at a veterans gathering and noting how she looked at me like I hung the moon. I have a dozen perspectives on how much she was loved, and every one of them makes me more grateful I had her at all." Dr. Brennan smiled, made a note on her tablet. "That's good, Robert. That's very good. It means the integration is stable. Your core identity, your love for Catherine, your relationship with Emily, your sense of self, it's not being eroded. It's being enriched." "Enriched," Robert tested the word. "That's one way to put it. I prefer to think I'm just a stubborn old man who refused to let go of what mattered most. Even when a pathogen tried to rewrite my brain, even when I had to make room for dozens of other people's memories, I held on. Because Catherine told me to. Because Emily needed me to. Because love, it turns out, is stronger than biology." The afternoon passed in comfortable routine. Emily made lunch, her version of Catherine's cornbread recipe, not quite right, but close enough to hurt in a good way. They ate on the porch, watched boats on the lake, talked about Emily's research and the upcoming publication in the New England Journal of Medicine that would detail Robert's case in full. "You'll be famous," Emily said. "The man who survived the impossible, the living bridge between the dead and the living." "I'd rather be anonymous," Robert said. "But if being famous means other people don't die because their doctors don't know what to do, then I'll deal with it. Besides, Catherine spent her whole life in secret. Maybe it's my turn to be seen." As the sun began its descent toward the tree line, casting long shadows across the porch, Emily asked the question Robert had been waiting for. "Grandpa, do you think you'll ever be normal again? Ever just be you, without all the others?" He considered this carefully. "No," he said finally. "And I don't think I want to be. These memories, they're not a burden anymore, Emily. They're a responsibility. A privilege, even. I carry people who would otherwise be completely forgotten. Morrison's love for his daughter. Chen's courage in battle. Danny's hope that the truth would survive even if he didn't. And yes, I carry their deaths too. Their fear and pain and last moments. But that's part of it. That's what it means to truly remember someone. You take all of it, the good and the bad, the light and the dark. You don't get to cherry-pick memory." "That sounds exhausting." "It is," he admitted. "But it's also," he searched for the right word, "purposeful. I survived for a reason. Not because I'm special or chosen or anything like that, but because someone needed to prove it was possible. Someone needed to show that you could integrate the pathogen and stay human, stay yourself, stay capable of love and connection and all the things that make life worth living." Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. "Grandma knew you could do it." "Your grandma had more faith in me than I had in myself," Robert said softly. "She lived a lie to protect a truth. She loved me knowing she could never tell me the whole story. And when she was dying, when she had every right to be angry or bitter or afraid, she used her last breath to prepare me, to give me the tools I'd need to survive this. He paused, voice thick. I don't know if I ever thanked her properly for that. For seeing me so clearly that she knew exactly what I'd need before I needed it. She knew, Emily said with certainty. She always knew. The sky turned orange, then pink, then purple. The loons began their evening calls. Somewhere in the woods behind the cabin, where the old training trails wound through trees that had seen generations of soldiers pass beneath them, the pathogen waited in the soil, dormant but not dead, patient, ready to wake when conditions aligned, when someone with the right genetic markers disturbed the right patch of earth. But now there were protocols. Now there were people who knew what to do. Now there was hope, instead of just death and confusion. Robert stood, stretched his back, felt the familiar aches of a body that had carried him 68 years and would carry him however many more he had. Emily stood with him. Want to walk down to the lake? She asked. Yeah, he said. Let's go watch the sunset. Your grandma loved the sunsets. They walked down the worn path together, grandfather and granddaughter, carrier and witness. The water reflected the sky like a mirror, like memory itself, showing what was and what had been, holding it all without judgment. At the lake's edge, Emily said, I'm proud of you, Grandpa, for surviving, for staying you, for making something beautiful out of something that should have destroyed you. Robert put his arm around her shoulders. I'm proud of you too, kiddo, for not running away, for standing up to federal agents, for turning your grandmother's sacrifice and my survival into something that saves lives. You're the real hero in all this. You're the one who made sure this meant something. We did it together, Emily said. All of us, you, me, Grandma, Uncle Danny, even the ones who died. We all contributed to this, to understanding, to survival, to making sure love and memory don't die just because bodies do. The sun touched the horizon, painting everything gold. Robert stood there with his granddaughter and felt the weight of all the memories he carried, his own and others' joy and sorrow, life and death, and felt for the first time in 5 years, completely at peace. He was Robert Mitchell, husband to Catherine, brother to Danny, grandfather to Emily, carrier of Morrison's love and Chen's courage and dozens of other people's last precious thoughts. He was all of these things and more. He was proof that the human heart was big enough to hold it all, that identity could expand without breaking, that love could survive anything, even death, even transformation, even the impossible weight of memory. Welcome home, Grandpa, Emily whispered. And he realized she'd been saying it every day for 5 years, ever since he'd woken up, changed, but still himself. Welcome home to the person he'd become. Welcome home to the life he'd rebuilt. Welcome home to the hope he represented. Welcome home, kiddo, he replied, and meant it with every memory he carried, every love he'd known, every moment he'd survived to reach this one. The sun set. The loons called. The lake held its reflections. And Robert Mitchell, changed but unbroken, stood witness to it all, to beauty and loss, to memory and love, to the stubborn human refusal to let anything precious be forgotten. In the end, that was all any of them could do. Remember, love, carry each other forward, and refuse, absolutely refuse, to let the darkness win. If you're between 55 and 68, you remember when a handshake meant something, when promises were kept, when love wasn't just a feeling but a choice you made every single day. Robert Mitchell's story isn't about some fancy science or government conspiracy. It's about what we all face as we get older. The weight of memory, the fear of losing ourselves, and the question of whether love really does conquer all. Think about the secrets you've carried, the losses you've survived, the moments when you had to choose between fighting and accepting. Robert chose love, chose to hold on to who he was even when everything tried to change him. He honored his wife's 46 years of quiet sacrifice. He gave his granddaughter the truth she deserved. He proved that at 68, you can still be strong enough, brave enough, human enough to matter. That's not just survival, that's victory. So here's my question for you. What's the one memory you're most afraid of losing as you get older? And if you could pass one truth to the next generation, what would it be? Drop your answers in the comments below. Let's remember together. Let's prove that our stories, your stories, still matter. Comment now and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Welcome home, friends. Welcome home.